Hi, welcome back to Blunt Force Business. I am Brian LaFauci.
And I'm Patrick Marino.
And today we have with us David Jones from Safe Harboar Properties. And we are going to jump right in today. If you're ready to ditch the W-2 and go full-time into your business, we're going to talk you through that process because we've all done it.
We've all done it.
Dave just did it. And we're going to show you how to do it right and take the fuck-ups we have and not do them. So let's jump into our Blunt Force facts for today. So Blunt Force fact number 1 about making the jump is, if you don't know your burn rate, your business will go up in smoke.
You got to have money to make money. So if you don't have enough money to cover your basic costs, your business isn't going to last very long. So you got to make sure you have that equation set before you jump in.
Or like if they say in CB40, remember that movie CB40?
Oh, geez.
Scared money don't make no money.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's from CB40.
Hey, we got a Brian LaFauci film
Movie
reference.
quote, trying to help. Blunt Force fact number 2 for today is my difference. Well done. Blunt Force fact number 2 is my risk tolerance is different than yours.
Yeah, so maybe I'm a single guy and I'm just out of school, and me taking a chance and sleeping on the factory floor and living on ramen noodles isn't the end of the world. But for you, you might have kids, you might have a wife, so starting your own business may have more consequences if it goes wrong. So again, something you have to think through before you do this.
That's it. And then Blunt Force fact number 3, I believe our greatest Blunt Force fact of all time is working for yourself is fucking awesome.
I mean, I freaking hate working.
No.
I freaking hate working. So if you're like me and you hate working, who better to work for than yourself?
Amen to that.
Right?
Once you go self-employed, you never go back.
Exactly.
That's
it's really,
the statement,
how about that?
I
It's
think. I
really
think that's
hard
the
to go
saying.
back. Really hard to go
It's
back.
very hard, very hard. I think you hear it sometimes. People like later in life, like they're ready for retirement. They want to work a little bit, but they're ready to ditch. That's when you see it. We do business brokerage. I do see it there. Like people are like, all right, I'm going to sell the company, and they'll be like, I'd love to stay on and work a little bit and still do stuff, but not have any of the responsibility anymore at that point.
Do you know anybody? Because I know at least one person I can think of who worked for themselves their whole lives, and when they did kind of change careers at the end, actually did enjoy working for somebody else?
Yeah, but I think it's that's a phase of life thing,
Right?
And it is less common.
Yeah.
You know, I know for me personally, I don't know if I ever see myself ever going back.
Right.
The thought of it makes me like, eugh.
Yeah.
You know, even sometimes I'll enter into it without going too far down the rabbit hole before we introduce our guest. Even sometimes I'll enter into a contract, and if the contract feels too much like an employment contract, I get itchy. I'm like, is this right? You know, is this right for the business?
Everybody who listens to this knows that I was there.
You were there.
I was in that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. So yes, with that company you had, absolutely. So, you know, there's just even that makes me slightly uncomfortable. So, all right, let's introduce Dave. David Jones with us today. Dave's become a good friend of mine. We have an investment in a company together that David started. We went and bought some storage facilities, and that's where our friendship and partnership really grew. We'd worked together before that. Fellow veteran here. He did, you know, I was right and joined the Air Force. He joined the Army and was wrong, but whatever. So, Dave, why don't you introduce yourself to the group, get a little background on you and, you know, what you're doing right now and how it applies to what we're talking about.
All right, great. Well, thanks for having me, guys. So just to get the Army thing out of the way, so like 10 active, 10 guard, I got out, retired in 2019. When I was finishing up my time in the Guard, I used all my benefits to go back to school. So I got like my associate's, bachelor's, and MBA, all paid for by the government. Thank you.
Amen.
Yep. And then I've been a serial entrepreneur. Started my first company like when I was 24. Bought an old historic home, converted into a bed and breakfast. It was a family venture. Then from that, I went to the logistics, coffee delivery, eventually beer delivery, multifamily homes, and then what you know more of is the self-storage side, which ended up spinning off more businesses that we weren't initially intending, but they all ended up following under our new property management umbrella at this point. So didn't know if you were going to mention the investment piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great relationship. So you had mentioned in that there was a lot to unpack there. We can dig into a little bit there. You mentioned coffee delivery. We're actually, as you noticed today, we're out of coffee as of today. So if you want to pick that one back up for next week, we would appreciate coffee delivery here next week. I don't know if that's something you still have your toe dipped in or not.
No, I am going to go visit one of my former suppliers,
Yes.
but our blunt force fact number 2, I think it was there, or no, number 1, the burn rate one. That's a story for that.
Well, all right. Well, take us down that road. I think that's great. I mean, so tell us how you, I'm going to imagine, incorrectly evaluated how much money you were going to need for that to sustain.
Yeah, and ironically, it wasn't it. So it was a brand new concept. So my idea back now, this is like 2014. I just got out of the active army, and I decided, why can't employees when they're at work just have coffee delivered to them? So this is before Uber Eats and all that crap was around, right? So it's literally like, why do they keep sending runners out? Now, we used to be in construction, so why do we always send like the laborer out to go get the coffee? Why lose
And
the
he's
person?
gone for 2 hours, and yeah. Right,
So it's like, why not just have it delivered to you while you're at work? So I was like, how come nobody does this? This has got to be easy to do, right? But there were no numbers on it. I couldn't go to a bank with a business plan and be like, oh, here's a proven business model. It didn't exist. So
Yep.
I set out one summer to prove the business model, and I thought I was going to have another revenue stream that would supply me until I was profitable. And the business was like that first summer. I proved the concept, paid off all the equipment. I was starting to be profitable, but not enough to make a living. And when that other revenue stream fell through, that was it. The business upside down. I had to close it down.
Right.
I mean,
So
those
just like that.
those delivery companies, I'm not sure if any of them are profitable. Like, I think they all lose money still. Because the concept for them is they're all backed by venture capital,
Yep.
right? And so they're all just trying to freaking grab market share and compete against each other. In the meantime, I'm not sure someone have to Google that, but I don't think any of those companies are profitable yet.
Really?
Yeah. I think they're
it's-
still losing money.
Yeah, they're all tech
Uber's
based
definitely losing
and
money.
evaluation too. That's the problem too. The tech evaluation so high on those, but the logistics is a beast of an industry to get into. When I moved into like the alcohol, beer, and wine delivery,
Yep.
Unfortunately, like as the business grows, your costs grow with it. Like so,
Yep.
it's almost impossible to get ahead until you get to a certain point that you're stable. Like, okay, I'm stopping here. I'm going to stop reinvesting everything, and now we can start to profit. Other than that, you just dump. It's a cash suck.
Yeah.
You just in order to grow, you have to put more money into it.
And I think that's what happens a lot of times when people jump in is that, and it's interesting when you think about the scalability, and that's why we brought up blunt force fact number 2 is, my risk tolerance different than yours. And there's a lot of factors with that, right? Like the factors being 1, personal risk tolerance and what our life is like and if it's the right time. But also, with each industry, that risk tolerance is also different. So risk tolerance is something that I think doesn't get as enough of like a solid evaluation or talked about enough in how important it is when you really think about jumping in, right? And just looking at beyond what the risks are in the industry, what you personally are prepared to step into. And you're talking about Uber and we're talking about these big companies that they consciously stepped into a space with knowing that their burn rate was going to be super high for a long time.
Right.
Like
And
Amazon.
convincing investors that, hey, like we need this cash. It's going to eventually, this is going to pay off.
Yep.
No one's going to want to leave their house. They're going to want things delivered.
Yep.
We live in the internet age, all that stuff. But they almost probably learned from guys like you. You probably weren't the only one who tried this. You know what I mean? Like there's probably a ton of you who've tried this and like they're all learning from those experiences.
Well, that's the thing. I think you can do it at a small scale. As a single business owner, it wasn't that hard for me to do it, but I had to commit all in because if you set your hours for the week, you have to be available those hours. You can't just, I don't feel like working today. Tough shit. Like you have to work.
Right.
Or
I
you're
was-
going to have to hire.
I was involved with a company that was doing chef delivered meals. So it'd be instead of you ordering from a restaurant, there'd be the chef who would cook meals and then the company would deliver these things. You'd order
Shannon
them online,
has that.
whatever. I mean, there's a couple of these models now. It's not like super unique, but they are all hyper local. And I think there's a few of them who are trying to like prove the local model. It's like, because like you have to, it's a little bit different from the Uber model where it's like you just go find any restaurant group. This is like you have to find this kind of commercial kitchen and find the chefs that are willing to do this. And then you have to have the delivery vehicles and get the food out and stuff like that. but definitely, I mean, yeah, I can relate to this is something that company failed,
Yeah.
right? They failed. So like
Yeah.
it's a high risk, but also high overhead company.
Yeah.
Right? High
Yeah,
overhead
and it's
business
human
model.
capital too, so it's the hardest one to deal with.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about dealing with people across multiple states with, different HR policies and pay rates and stuff like that, like when I did government contracting, we had people in every state, and you had to literally know exactly what county you had to pay at what rates, and it's just if you don't keep up with it, like Department of Labor will come in and squash you.
Right.
Like it's not a joke.
One of the ways around the risk reward blunt force fact is by doing it by having not every like you couldn't have probably done what you were doing as a side gig, but having like a side gig that becomes a business.
Yep.
Whereas like that's what happened with me. Whereas like I had these side projects that I was doing and they were improving and growing.
Yep.
And then when shit started to hit the fan with my W-2 job, it was like, all right, I already had the business has already started.
Yeah.
But I had the backdrop of this other job kind of supported me, and at no point was I even considering starting my own business at that point, but it just kind of happened organically. So that is one way around having like a ton of risk in it.
Yeah.
Is when you are able to have kind of a side gig that becomes
Because then
a
you
real
can
gig.
then you can evaluate the burn rate. Like
Yeah.
what am I experiencing right now? And if you've gotten past that break even point as a side hustle, I think it's a little easier to evaluate that jump, because now all you really have to do and say, all right, if I'm going full time, what are the additional expenses? I don't have just projections anymore. I have like a real profit and loss statement I can look at. Now I'm going to do this full time. Does it require me to add anything to the expense sheet, right? Or take on any additional loans? And what does that do to this balance sheet? But it gives you way better, projections, and we know this, right? You and I both played in real estate and done development stuff. And the one thing you realize in real estate and in business development is whatever you think it's going to be 25% more than that. Like your 100% capped out expense number is going to be 125, and your 100% like, all right, I evaluated my revenue projections, and they're going to be about 25% less than that. And if you go into it like that, it will help you really get a much more realistic burn rate, because I've never seen a project that doesn't do that. Never. Ever.
Well, that, and I could sit down and interview 100 different business owners. I bet probably not even a handful could even tell me like their true expenses, what they are, because there's all this once a year expense that they just forget about,
right?
Or little things that they
right.
just kind of wash off or something. So yeah, they're always off.
Yeah,
I forget about yearly renewals all the time. They'll come up like a week before, and I'll be like, "Oh, your yearly renewal is coming up," and it'll be hundreds of dollars. I'm
right.
like, "Oh shit!"
Oh yeah. We just paid all our tax bills that time of year, like for the tax preparation bills for the companies. I was like, oh my God, that number starts to add up, that trickle number. So for us, just to get to, we're talking about that specific point, and then we can go on to other things from there. But because we're talking about that burn rate, I think for our listeners, one of the things I want to reiterate is what's the solution to that, right? So that I don't find myself now I'm in this, and I talk this all the time when I'm doing business development and startup, especially when we do financial projections. I say the rule is 125/75 right out the gate. So you're gonna put your projections together based on like what you think is realistic, and then then when they're done, I want you to take every expense line item and I want you to bump it up to be 125% of what you thought, and I want you to take every revenue item and I want you to cut it by 25%. Mm-hmm. And now, are you still? Where's your break-even point now? And do you have enough to get there? Because that's probably good. If that doesn't happen, awesome. But there's a very good chance that's what's going to happen for a million different reasons, and if you're wrong, then who gives a shit? If you're wrong, then nothing bad happens. If you're wrong, you're just in a better spot, right? But if you're right, you're prepared. And that's one of the the takeaways to help insulate as much as possible to deal with whatever their threshold is, their risk threshold, right? Because now you're looking at, okay, now this might be reality. So where's your risk threshold on that now?
Well,
I was going to say just that, and not everything's in your control either. Like expenses, like you have insurance
Well, that's
costs,
why.
they're going to go
Right.
up every year. You
Yeah,
don't know
that's
how
why.
much.
Yeah.
Like, cost of goods could go up at any given point. So
let's talk about a business that succeeded versus the businesses that failed. I mean, it's good to learn lessons, but let's talk about something that's working out and how these one or all of these things apply.
Well, I think that all three of us could look at how we evaluated risk and moved it forward to
Let's
now
talk
be
specifically-
in a successful place. I mean, you just recently did this with the shed company that falls under Safe Harbor.
So tell us about the shed company.
Yeah, so
What is
tell-
the shed company?
yeah, I'll backtrack a little bit. So when I was in like the multifamily home, that was my other revenue stream when I was in the coffee business. And then I just had a couple bad tenants that refused to pay. And in the state, it took more than a year to get them out. My expenses were through the roof. My revenue dropped to zero, and that's what killed it. So
Yep.
I'd always wanted to get into self-storage. I love the business model of self-storage. It doesn't have all that other BS that,
Right. Yeah.
the residential real estate multifamily.
Now people's calling saying that, there's a leak and then
Well,
yeah.
now that I think through it, I haven't thought about self-storage very often, but like when do you see the self-storage business fail or close? I feel like they just keep expanding and showing up and like
seems to have some resilience. Yes.
Well, that's the thing. It's you can't say recession proof, but when times are bad, divorce rates go up. Divorces are good for self storage. When economic booms are happening and people have money, they start spending and their extra toys have to get stored somewhere.
Right.
And then in economic downturns, when the housing market's down, people start downsizing and they don't want to get rid of their stuff, so they put almost every scenario is good for storage, and the population keeps growing, so. It's an awesome industry to get into. So we had bought a property. This is the one that Brian was referring to, where we invested in a property in New York, and attached to that business, they also sold sheds on the lot. Totally separate business. So we split the two bottoms separately.
Linear model, though, right? Hey, you're going to move out of here. You need a place to put your stuff in your new place, right? How about a shed? It's a good
It's
synergy,
a good compliment,
right?
yeah.
Really good synergy there.
So what's the business? Are they leasing the sheds that are in the lot, or are they selling the sheds?
Sell the sheds. Yeah, it's a drop ship model. So it's zero, cash intensive as far as capital that you need to tie up. The manufacturer owns the product from the manufacturer. They drop it on the lot just as a show model, but they're responsible for the logistics and the delivery and drop off and everything, and you just get a piece of every sale.
Are the sheds made of particle board or particle
Here
board?
we go.
Sorry, I had to. I feel like it's a Massachusetts reference.
Fall of particle board.
Massachusetts sports radio. People listen to sports radio in Massachusetts. Sorry. There's a shed company. There's a shed company that advertises on sports radio in Massachusetts. And they
He was
talk-
just
the com-
waiting to get
the
that in,
compet-
by the
The
way.
competitors sell their sheds are follow particle board.
Not our sheds.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so go ahead.
I
Sorry.
should say our sheds, not your sheds.
So sorry. So go back to the sheds.
So it wasn't a business we were planning on getting into. It was just an ancillary purchase from an acquisition that we had in the self-storage side of the house. And then by mistake, we ended up moving into this area because Facebook's algorithm, whatever, pulled a post that we had in New York and brought it to somebody's house where they posted it here. And we sold dozens and dozens of sheds to the point where the regional manager was like, "Who the F are you guys? And why are you selling sheds in my territory?" And then they made us get a lot here. But that just boomed out of control this year. So it's crazy. So unplanned, but fortunate.
I gotta say, when you say that, I'm not surprised you're doing well, but I am surprised the sheds are doing well because I feel like we're entered into this space with the economy where I would feel sheds would be a disposable income item, and maybe I'm wrong, right? Very well could be wrong, and I feel like disposable income things have kind of had a little bit of a hit. So,
well, was there a pandemic era boom for this? Because I feel like I know a bunch of people who along with their home improvement put sheds in the back. It was kind of like a
Yeah, but no, this
stimulus
is
thing
now.
and
I mean,
extra.
this is doing well
I know that's what I'm
right
saying.
now.
So was there? When did you start the actual shed part?
So we launched the one in New York a little over a year ago when we
Okay,
bought
so
it.
we are
year and a half there.
post-pandemic.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And
it's not
then this new
necessarily
one just
stimulus
started in
payments.
October. And by January, this first quarter, we're actually the number one shed dealer in the country. Like it's
It's
crazy.
fucking wild.
So sheds are freaking getting sold off the lot like crazy, huh? And these are all pre-made.
You need
Are
one of
doing
those
any
wavy
custom-
you need wavy arm guy in the pile.
You know, we don't need that.
I got a picture of him, and
Wacky waveable.
Wacky waveable arm, man.
Inflatable arm
Wacky
too.
waveable.
My kids love him, by the way.
See, there's wacky wavable arm, man. Of course
So
there
these
is.
are, I
You
mean,
have
these
to
sheds,
have
is there
one.
any customization in these, or are these all just sold
No,
straight
so
off the
there's
lot?
there's lot models where they just drop them on the lot. We usually have a couple dozen on the lot at any given time, but you can custom build one, and the lead time in that is like to have a lot model delivered, it can get delivered in a week or two. To have a custom one delivered, it's like 4 to 5 weeks. So you only delay a few weeks custom building it. They're that efficient.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That
it's
the
fantastic.
business is doing so well right now. Because I was thinking like pandemic boom, that would have been one of the things.
Yeah, well, a lot of home improvement
Yeah.
things, all other home improvement things are trending down.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Right now.
Although I have a client or client / former client who saw that, right. They were doing like a ton of this, and then boom down, and then all of a sudden uptick again this year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's almost
Well,
like people spent all their money, and then they were like,
And
"Oh
now
shit,
it's
we
coming-
need it
now
again.
it's coming back,
We
yeah.
need that stuff again."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mix of things. So that's the thing. I had a guy talking to me about chickens the other day. So he wanted to use one for a chicken coop. A lot of people, it's their yard equipment, lawnmower, stuff like that. Like maybe they had a service when times were good
Yep.
before the pandemic, but now they're mowing their own lawn, so they got to store it somewhere.
Interesting.
You
Yeah.
know, or they're still building. I mean, they're still building all over here. So I literally just custom built a she shed for somebody that just built a lake house in Westport.
Yeah.
So it's
That's great.
it's all sorts of things, or they have like historic, like they got an old Corvette or something and they want to put it in a nice garage. But the wife's like, hey, get your crap out of the actual garage because I want my stuff in there. So
Yeah.
go park it somewhere. So they want it nice and covered. So yeah, it's a mix.
I think that's great. One of the things that we all can definitely talk to in this process, and for our listeners, is if our listeners are on that fence, that making that what we say, jumping off the cliff to say I'm all in is a tough decision to make, and it's different for everybody. But I do think there's key components to evaluating that risk, and I'd like to kind of talk to them, right, and how we
You can talk to
evaluate
whatever
that.
you want to talk to, Professor LaFauci.
I appreciate that.
It's your
Yeah,
podcast.
and it's your. When it fails, it's yours. When it's successful, it's mine. That's how. One of the things for me, and love to hear all of your takes, was the feeling of responsibility for my family. And you talked about that at the beginning, and probably delayed when I made that full-time jump a little bit. What delayed it was, one, concern for health insurance. And the cost of health insurance as self-employed is very high. And then two, being able to backfill a salary that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Right, coming out of that, right? So coming out of it with leaving a salary that was pretty good. And this, everyone goes through this same thing, and it's different for everybody. But how did you, what was it that gave you the comfort to do that? And what was it that gave you the comfort to do that? Or was a little bit of it circumstantial and timing just was right?
Yeah, I can start, I guess. More recently, because I've done this a couple times in my career.
Right.
More recently, it was just the timing was better. Like the sheds are just doing that well, and we're getting to the point where we have, a couple other irons in the fire that are going to boom the business even more.
Yep.
And it's going to take more management, more oversight, more protocols. We're launching into more states, so it's like, well, who the hell's going to manage that then? So it's one of the things where it's like, I know I'm going to be losing this W-2, nice steady salary, which is what the wife is concerned about.
Right.
Right. It's holy crap, And I'm like, but a W-2 job's not really secured either. Like technically I could get canned any day for whatever reason, or the contract could end or whatever the case. So like, I don't believe in security for even W-2 jobs, but I have more control in this sort of business because I know launching into this, instead of doing it part-time, doing it full-time, I said, not only can I improve the margins, but I can go in here and grow the business, and it more than justifies, hopefully, me jumping in.
Right.
So
Right.
the cost gets eaten and then some, and the business is able to actually grow.
So for you, it was the opportunity was as you were doing it in that quote unquote side hustle type capacity, you were able to watch it grow, do a litmus test on it, see what was happening, and then do analysis, say, all right, I think this is going to sustain.
Right.
You know,
Well, that's the thing,
grow
right?
to sustain.
Some of the risks or the unknown factors, I was able to get through that, with, stable outside income to support it just in case it didn't.
Yep.
And then it was, okay, we tested it. It works. We've proven this model. Now it's time to scale it.
I really do love that model. Whenever I can get someone who's considering business ownership to do their start with some kind of like backing that is a fallback, there are many reasons why. One, some things more, if you need funding for it, it's way easier to fund if you have a W-2 job, because a bank will look at that and be like, oh, there's a little collateral coming in on top of it. Two, stress is a big thing as business. Like you said, work sucks, but the best thing is to work for yourself, right? Because at least you control the suck a little bit.
Yeah.
But two, it's like you can look at the whole piece with the fallback of, all right, I get a little bit of stress off my plate, knowing I still have something coming in, and you can the third being you can evaluate, like you'll be able to evaluate on a smaller scale how it feels, what it does, and then kind of grow and replicate it from there, which is easier than just. And this is what's always tough about brick and mortar. I think this is why restaurants fail so frequently. It's because some of the most successful restaurants I know now, how they got there, and Red's is an example of this. My buddy Shane that was on our podcast from the Burgundians, example of this. Like, they won't run very successful businesses, but they were able to phase into it. So they started food truck or pop-ups, right?
They had a powerful. Your buddy had a powerful brand way before he started this restaurant.
Way before he opened the brick and mortar. Yeah. And I always get nervous when someone is going into a restaurant for the first time, brick and mortar. They could be the best chef in the world, because that model is that you talk about burn rate and being able to really evaluate what it's going to do and feel like.
Power to the Burgundian too, though, because I know a company that I wasn't personally involved with, but I have a lot of personal relationships around, where they did the same model, but they still failed.
Yeah.
Went from strong brand, food truck, kind of build everything up.
And they weren't able to translate it to,
and just couldn't keep it going.
Well, restaurants, and that's why McDonald's does it the way they do. They're in the real estate game, not the restaurant game.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. So if you don't, again, controlling costs, if you don't own the building you're in, then you're beholden to whoever does. And that's the thing. It's, do you have control over your property? If not, they're going to see that you're doing well, and then they're going to increase your rent.
Of course.
Increase your rent and keep your margin the same. So even if you keep growing, you're still going to get that slim margin. That's restaurant stuff.
Especially if the owners of those properties have gone through the Blunt Force Business Grow Hard program, and they know step number 2 is raise your prices. So, obviously that's what they're going to do.
I was going to say,
is that a shameless plug?
No, it's freaking grow hard, baby. I was going to say, like, I come to this from a very different perspective from both of you. You already had a family. You were already an entrepreneur. You had a W-2 job. Like, I always had, like, I've said it on this podcast before, but I was making more money than I would be when I was W-2, than I'd be willing to say was not a lot of money, because it might embarrass people who don't make a lot of money. And it's like I was doing okay. But like when I started working for myself and I started like piling on projects, and all of a sudden, like, I was making way more money than I was ever making in a W-2 job. It happened overnight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was like, that was like being in the lows of being a business owner. And like, I've been in the ups and downs, and like one of the times I was in one of those, I did some work looking for a W-2 position. Mm-hmm. And these jobs we talked about this in the Millionaire podcast. These jobs required more experience than I had. They required an MBA, which I didn't have. And they were going to pay me less than I was currently making. You know what I mean? And it's like, as a business owner, you have this opportunity.
Bo knows what you mean.
You have this opportunity for scale that you just don't have as a W-2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, as a W-2, you're gonna make, unless you're in sales.
Yeah.
Right? Unless your commission structure is really good. But as a W-2, you're gonna get your cost of living improvement every year. You know what I mean? Your performance review and whatever it is. Like, that's how you make more money. As a business owner, it's like, there's so many different avenues where you can make more money.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. And then your lows could be zero. Like, my lows have generally been like right around my best times as a W-2.
Right.
And it's like that for me, that was the compelling factor. Yeah. It was like when you look around and you see people who've got disposable income, like, there are people who have good jobs and do very well. We talked about CEOs for big corporations,
Yeah.
but those are such a small percentage of the people who make money.
Right.
Those people who make money are the people who own the businesses.
Yep.
Right. And like then you're making the money. The money is coming into your pocket instead of getting distributed to the people who employ you.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
So I think that was the motivating factor for me to stay in it.
Yeah.
Was like this is where the opportunity is here.
Yeah.
You know, and I was fortunate in that before this, I wasn't, I was never really in like I've been in some W-2, like some real W-2, but even in my W-2 jobs, they're very entrepreneurial. So like when I was working with like I was a regional manager. So like I was basically in charge of that program.
Right.
I started it, grew it, you know what I mean? Like whatever it is.
Yeah.
Event manager. I started the event, like I was in charge of that. And I was very connected to the money at those particular jobs. So when I moved into owning my own business, it was a very easy step for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
I mean, like, not saying it wasn't, you know what I mean
Yeah.
by not hard. Like, it wasn't that big of a transition because I was kind of already an owner already.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the role felt very similar to that.
Yeah. Well, I could say that probably my life has shaped me too, because both my parents owned businesses growing up. Both ultimately failed, but that kind of drove me too. And I think as I get older too, I just get tired of trading hours for dollars. Like I'm sick of it. Is the biggest thing for me. And I'm like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to invest in it. I'm going to grow it because I don't want to work until I'm 75 like my dad is. Like he has to work because he doesn't have any other plan. I want to be able to retire if I want, or at least consult on the side or something like that.
Yep.
Like I want that choice.
Yeah.
And I can't get that in a W-2 job. I can't get ahead enough to do that.
It is true. You in this role, as scary as it might be for some people to take that jump, it is going to give you the most, and it's not going to be easy. We talked about this with the Blunt Force Factory, like working for yourself is awesome, right? Or fucking awesome, whatever type of awesome you want it to be. And originally we had kicked around working for yourself is hard but fucking awesome, and you're like, why even throw that in there? Because
Working
work
for
is
somebody
hard.
else is hard.
Work is right.
Yeah.
Everything's hard. Okay, maybe some people can put themselves in a job where they can kind of just skate and it can be wicked easy and blah, blah, blah. Right. Those do exist. But those people aren't listening to our call anyways, because those people are not in the lane they're not our listeners. They're not our audience, right? If you're sitting there with the easiest job ever and not challenged and you're really content, drop off the call. Stop listening. You're not our people. That's fine.
People are just different. We
Right.
talked about this before. Like the amount of hours you work has nothing to do with the amount of money you work. Zero. They're not related.
Right.
There's so many people out there. That's one of the things that comes up in politics and whatever it is. All these people are just killing themselves
Yeah.
and just they're not getting forward.
Right.
And then they become resentful. Like, I was
Yeah.
told if I worked hard,
Yeah.
that's just not the way it works. It's not true.
No. You got to take
It has
some
nothing
risk.
to do with
The reality
working
is,
hard.
and talking to that, real growth comes from taking that risk and believing in yourself and saying, I'm going to go out and try this and I'm going to believe in myself and do it.
You
And
can't just manifest it though. You have to.
Right.
Force fact number one, like you
Right.
got to know the burn rate.
Yeah, no,
Right?
you will be systematic about it, but you have to be willing to believe in yourself and take the invest. And one more piece of that I want to bring up to evaluating everybody's different risk tolerance is the family situation is really important. And one of the things that we talk about a ton when we're working with clients, and I'll ask them this, I'm like, you married? Yeah. Do you have kids? Yeah. What does your wife think about what you're about to do? Is she 100% on board what you're about to? Because if you tell me, like a lot of times when I'm working with clients that are looking to start, I'm like, are you married? They're like, yep. I'm like, can your wife come on these calls? And be like, well, she's not going to do any, or he's not going to do anything with them, whatever it is. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't matter because what you're not understanding is they are going to be 100% affected by this. Good if it goes well, but also when it's not going well, they're going to be the first one to turn and look at you. And if they are not 100% behind it, they're going to turn and look at you, and you're going to have spouse pressure to back out of this thing you just dumped all this time and effort into, and they haven't really been there through this part, right? The planning, the all this stuff. They've been doing their own thing and haven't seen it, so they have no idea how invested you are in this thing.
My ex used to joke she never really knew what I did, even when I did what I did. Even when I
My
had
mom says that all the
even when I
time.
had
What
a
is
W-2.
My mom's like, what do you do?
So when I moved
are you in
into-
the mafia? No.
When I moved into ownership, I don't think she really knew what I was doing either. So she's like,
Right.
"Oh, he's paying the bills, right? That's what he's doing. Like that's it, you know." So what was your conversation? Because your conversation sounded like it was very different. So maybe you
I'm
could talk
just
about
so
that a little bit.
stubborn-headed that we talked about it, and I said I'm doing it.
Right.
I've never gotten the full support because she's of the kind of old school mentality of just keep working and working and work for a W-2 job and
Yep.
take something stable and steady. And I said I can't do that. Every time I've tried to do it, I think you talked about before, seeing that kind of opportunity or contract or something like that, and like, ooh, wow, that's good money. Let me go
Right.
do that, and
Right.
it is, but then it handcuffs you to that.
Yeah.
And you can't
Yep.
get ahead because you start making some extra money and then, oh shoot, let's buy this, let's do this. Like I never really got far enough ahead doing that. So I always knew I had to go back to the entrepreneurial side, and I kind of had it when we got together. We've been together 10 years now, so I've always kind of been doing something. So, but it's tough. Like even when things are going well, it's still you're going to work instead of staying home, or can't
Yeah.
somebody else do that right now?
Yeah.
Or, well, how come you got to take a meeting late? Like everything you still have to justify while
It
you're
is
doing
hard.
it.
It is hard.
Yeah.
And we've I think we've all dealt with that. We've all dealt with the fact
we
that
talked about this all the time, especially with the fatherhood podcast. But like one of the hard parts about working from home at all. So you're a business owner, and I'm primarily working from home. My boy sees me work, which to me means he's also watching me not paying attention to him. Right. And so that affects our relationship sometimes. He's like, Dad, you're always working. You're never paying attention to me. And like, I think in terms of like pure hours, he's probably wrong.
Right.
Like that's not his perception. His perception is that
Right.
he sees me constantly engaged in work and he doesn't understand,
right.
Yeah.
and that's what
But
it
he
is.
does
Like, I have
that
to work
too
on that.
because you have also set yourself up to always be available for him. So
Right, yeah.
so you're picking him up where a lot of there's a lot of people out there that
Well, he doesn't have that. He doesn't know what the other dads are doing.
Right.
What the other parents are doing.
Right.
Like, he just
Our
knows
reality
that
is our
I'm
per-
freaking.
our reality is-
I'm freaking
is-
busy.
yeah,
we talked about.
perception.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the challenges of owning your own business too. Is like you are more
that's a good
accountable to that. So that means something has got to give. A compromise. You are less accountable to your family in some instances.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to give some of that up.
Yep.
You can't give all of it up. But
Yep.
you have to give some of it up.
That and that kind of negative connotation too is anytime I'm gone from the house, it's, daddy's away at a work call, daddy's away at a meeting
Yeah.
for work. Like it's always work related. So, work sucks because every time, it's work related, I miss him.
Right.
So, I think it
that's-
is different.
But to your point, Patrick, same shit in a W-2 for the most
Yeah.
part, right?
I mean, my-
and in that realm, a lot of times you don't have the authority to change your situation, right? And in this realm, we have the authority to, might cost us a little bit financially or whatever, but we have the authority to change our situation, which is nice. Helpful.
And you can't always I have some friends who work in jobs who've got overtime possibilities. So they work more overtime. That like most people don't have that.
But that's also, you brought it up at the beginning.
It's like you
that's
can work more
trading
hours, doesn't matter.
hours for dollars.
Still, yeah.
And
It's
the
just
goal
slightly
here,
better.
if you're listening to this podcast, you're working towards not trading hours for dollars.
Yeah.
That's where you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
So this is good. This is great today. Do you have anything else before we kind of wrap?
Well,
for
it's
today?
like what should we leave people with? Like, should they do this? Should they go all in?
I mean,
No, should they not?
you're asking the wrong people. We're all going to say yes, they should. But so let's bring it back to the blunt force facts.
I mean,
And-
one thing that we've done. I mean, like Brian and I here, we got blunt force business. We're a year in. We're very fortunate that this is not what we're counting on right now. It's still growing. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we couldn't have started this.
Yeah, we
without
scaled it
having-
off of something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, another entrepreneur. Right. One thing can scale another. I would say this: most important fact number one: know your financials. Use the 75-125 rule. I think it's to me.
We
it
could do a
is-
podcast on the 75-125
We can do
rule.
that. Yeah, it's like the
As opposed
80-20
to the
rule,
80-20,
but better.
I was gonna say.
But better. It's better. I was reading Traction. I don't know if you ever read the book Traction. And in Traction, he references 2080, and Patrick and I have done a lot of work on 2080. But use the 75-125 rule. If you missed that early in the podcast, go back, listen to it. It's a great way to put together financial projections that insulate you a little bit from unforeseen risk. Know your risk tolerance. So have conversations with your family, the people around you. Everyone's going to be different. And then I'd say lastly, Patrick, two things. One, if you can dip your toe in the water with the backing of something coming in, that's a great way to start. And then once you get to the point where you're at the cliff, give us a call and we'll help you jump that cliff, and give you the support you need to jump that cliff, because it's going to be scary no matter what. Even if you're a high risk person, which on the real estate side, my partner and he's a little more high risk than I am. He'll see something and shiny penny looks good and we may be going, right? But even with him, like there's fear, right? He'll call me back the next day and be like, so, all right, I slept on it, But at the end of the day, you have to be willing to jump. If you're going to you have to get it in your head that once every box is checked, and you're as close enough to safe as you're ever going to be, because this decision is not a safe decision. Like you said, there are safer decisions out there, even though, can you always lose a W-2? Yes. But there are safer decisions out there. But if this is something you're passionate about, then systematize it. Once you've checked all the boxes and done the things that we've talked about here and said to do in preparation, you can fucking go. It's go time. Call us up and get you over the line.
Any closing advice based on your trials and tribulations, some failures, some successes?
Yeah, just more on the risks. Like, not only know your risk tolerance, but know what the risks are. And if you can dip your toe in that water, you can start to test what some of the risks are.
Yeah,
but you have to stay vigilant. As soon as you get comfortable in business, you're going to get hammered, because a competitor is going to come in or something's going to blindside you. So you always got to see what can take me off my feet, what can disrupt my business, and always be not hedging yourself, but just always on the lookout for the bad, not just the good shit that's happening. Because that's when complacency kills.
There are millions of new business starts every year that the federal government records as new business starts, right? So that means a percentage of them are coming after you with vigor and new ideas. And if you're not staying on your toes, like you said, you're fucked, because you'll get overrun.
I was just going to say, or they're going to leverage new technology that comes in. So again,
right.
it's across all boards. It could be anything.
What's going to happen is your shed company is going to get overtaken by Safe Harboar Properties and their new shed company that is run by David Jones, kicking out sheds across the country. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find your sheds so we can bump your numbers a little bit for Q2?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are local here to the South Coast region, so safeharborswansea.com is our local shed business here. But we can literally deliver anywhere. There's manufacturers all over. Our manufacturer is a national one. So awesome. We can literally ship from anywhere.
And these are not fall-particle board sheds.
Yeah, come in and check them out. We're right in that old Toys R Us parking
Reed's
lot.
Ferry. Have you heard of Reed's Ferry?
Why do I know that?
Because they're the ones that freaking advertise on Boston Sports Radio all day.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember this. Like, call 877. Whatever.
What's the website again?
The quality
for you?
shed.
SafeHarborsWansea.com.
Safe Harbor better than Reed's Ferry. I don't even know anybody at Reed's Ferry. So,
but it is better.
But they're not fall-particle board. Remember that.
Not at all. Get your he shed and your she shed. Get a we shed. Somewhere right in the middle. I'm Brian LaFauci.
Patrick Marino.
David Jones.
Till next time.
Thank you.